Why do most older people seem to fade after a C? Even those who were sharp and doing well just a few years before often begin to decline. The truth is, most people assume that what happens after a C is purely about genetics or luck, but that's far from the whole story. In this article, we are going to look at 5 unexpected reasons, often overlooked and rarely talked about, that explain why many older adults struggle to live long or stay healthy past a C. These aren't the usual suspects like diet, smoking, or exercise. These are deeper, more subtle factors that often slip through the cracks, even in people who have done most things right. The good news: once you know what they are, you can do something about them. Reason number 8. Loss of microsocial engagement. One of the first and most overlooked reasons many older people don't live long after a C is the quiet disappearance of what experts call microsocial engagement. These are not your deep friendships or family gatherings, those still matter, of course, but rather the small, seemingly insignificant interactions that used to fill your everyday life without you even noticing. Think about how often you used to say hello to the mailman, share a quick joke with the cashier at the grocery store, or nod to the neighbor walking their dog across the street. Those tiny moments of contact weren't just pleasant. They were regulating your nervous system, reinforcing your sense of belonging, and keeping your brain's social wiring sharp and engaged. Why it matters. But after a C, many older adults stop going to the store themselves. They order things online or ask family to help. They stop chatting with strangers because their hearing isn't what it used to be, or they stop walking outside simply because the weather's a little too cold or their knees don't feel steady. When those small social touchpoints start fading away, so does something else: vitality. What's interesting is that most people don't even realize it's happening. They think they're just simplifying life, but what they're actually doing is removing the low-level social interactions that stimulate brain function, elevate mood, and signal to the body that they are still part of the living, breathing, everyday world. A simple solution. It doesn't have to be complicated. I've known men in their ACS who stayed sharp simply because they walked to the Sam coffee shop each morning, said hello to the Sam staff, and nodded to the Sam 3 people on the corner. That 5-minute stretch of human connection wasn't just routine, it was lifeblood. It gave their day shape, kept them accountable, and made them feel seen. The biological cost. There's a biological cost when this disappears. The brain responds to loneliness, both the deep kind and the subtle kind, as a stressor. It changes hormone levels, raises inflammation, and weakens immunity. But most importantly, it begins to shrink the networks in the brain that are responsible for memory, attention, and emotional regulation. In plain terms, it makes you feel older faster. So if you found yourself not talking as much to people during the day, or if you've simply stopped going out for small errands, stopped initiating casual conversations, or started feeling invisible in your community, it's time to reverse that. Because those moments of connection, even the ones that seem forgettable, are quietly telling your brain and your body you still matter. You are still part of something. And that message is one of the most powerful medicines for staying alive, not just in years, but in spirit. Reason number 2, overcautious inactivity. Another silent reason many people don't make it far past a C is something that on the surface seems like wisdom: being careful. But there's a fine line between being careful and becoming overly cautious, and once that line is crossed, the consequences are rarely immediate but always cumulative. How it begins. It often begins with good intentions. Maybe you slipped on the stairs once or nearly lost your balance on the sidewalk, so you decide to cut back on walking outside. You stop bending to reach low shelves or climbing into the backseat of the car. You sit down more, and you stay sitting longer. People around you applaud your caution. Don't push it, they say. Take it easy. And before you realize it, you've created a life that's safe but still. The hidden cost. But here's what no one talks about. When movement stops, So the strength, and not just in your legs or arms, but in your coordination, your balance, your inner stability. Your body isn't like a machine that rests to stay efficient. It's more like a garden that needs tending. And when activity slows to a trickle, things don't just stay the same, they weaken. One of the first places it shows is the core. Most people don't realize how important those deep trunk muscles are for everything. Standing, walking, lifting, even getting out of a chair. If those muscles go unused, even for a few weeks, they shrink. And when they shrink, your balance suffers. You start to wobble, and the cycle deepens. A cautionary tale. I knew a man named Walter, Bayasi, who stopped going on his evening walks after he slipped once on a rainy day. No broken bones, just a scare. But that scare was enough. He went from walking a mile every evening to sitting and watching television most nights. Within 6 months, he lost 10 pounds of muscle. His legs felt like jelly. His doctor warned him, but the damage had already started. Walter didn't stop because he was weak. He became weak because he stopped. Finding the balance. Now, I'm not suggesting you ignore real risk. There are smart ways to protect yourself. Using handrails, wearing stable shoes, clearing walkways, even using a cane if it helps. But there's a difference between managing. Reason number 10. Disrupted sleep cycles from irregular light exposure. There's a silent clock inside your body that doesn't tick, but it governs almost everything. Your mood, your metabolism, your immune system, even how your brain repairs itself at night. And after age C, this internal clock, your circadian rhythm, becomes especially sensitive. The problem. One of the biggest reasons it goes off track. Not enough light during the day, and too much light at night. You might not notice it at first. Maybe you've started sleeping a little more during the day, nodding off in the afternoon sun. Or maybe you've stopped going outside regularly, especially in the colder months. You might turn on the TV in the evening, or leave the lights on until late while reading or watching a movie. Each of these changes might seem harmless, but together they quietly confuse the body about when it's supposed to be alert and when it's supposed to rest. How light regulates your body. The body relies on natural light to stay in rhythm. Bright morning light tells your brain it's time to wake up, to get moving, to send energy where it's needed. And darkness at night signals the release of melatonin, that gentle hormone that prepares you for deep, healing sleep. But when your eyes don't receive enough of that natural daytime light, or when your evenings are filled with artificial brightness from screens or lamps, your internal signals get scrambled. The consequences. The result. You might find it harder to fall asleep or harder to stay asleep. You might wake up feeling groggy even after 8 hours in bed. You might find your energy lagging throughout the day, or your memory feeling a little fuzzier than usual. And over time, that sleep disruption affects more than just your energy. It weakens your immune function, makes your mood less stable, and even increases the risk of cognitive decline. D. Vitamin D connection. There's also the issue of vitamin D, which the body naturally produces when your skin is exposed to sunlight. After a C, your ability to synthesize vitamin D through the skin decreases, which means regular outdoor exposure becomes even more critical. Without it, your bones, muscles, and immune system all take a hit. A simple fix. I once spoke with a woman named Helen who was 84 and had been feeling increasingly tired and disoriented. Her blood work looked fine. Her diet hadn't changed, and she wasn't taking any new medications. The turning point. Her doctor simply recommended she spend 20 minutes every morning sitting by the window with her blinds wide open, and to turn off her screens 1 hour before bed. Within 2 weeks, her sleep improved. So did her memory. So did her mood. It wasn't a new pill. It was light. What you can do. So if you've been spending most of your time indoors with the curtains drawn, or if your evenings are filled with blue light from a phone or TV, It's time to shift. Try to get outside within an hour of waking up, even if it's just for a few minutes on your porch. Let your eyes and skin soak in that morning light. In the evening, dim the lights. Let your body prepare to wind down. These gentle rhythms are more than comfort. They are survival. Because what many people don't realize is that the body doesn't just get old from wear and tear. It also gets old from disorganization, from systems being out of sync. And restoring your light cues, your sleep schedule, your daily rhythms, that's how you bring that organization back. That's how you tell your body, even at 85 years old, we are still on schedule, we are still in motion, we are still here. Reason number 4. Emotional suppression from loss and isolation. By the time many people reach their 80s, they've carried more loss than most younger folks can imagine. A spouse, a sibling, a lifelong friend, sometimes even a child. And while the outside world may politely offer sympathy, what's rarely acknowledged is just how much those losses accumulate, not just in memory, but in the body. The weight of unprocessed grief. What often happens after the physical impact? And over time, that emotional weight becomes physical. It starts to affect your immune system, your digestion, your sleep. It changes your hormones. It puts your nervous system in a constant state of quiet tension. And the hardest part, it happens silently. On the outside, you might look calm. You might even say you are fine. But if your shoulders have grown a little heavier, if your breathing is a bit shallower, if your spark has dimmed just enough that you no longer feel like yourself, grief might be the reason, even if you haven't spoken about it in years. George's story. I remember a man named George, Chiasi, who lost his wife of such years. He didn't cry much, said it wasn't his way, said he was doing all right. But within a year, he'd lost weight, stopped going to the senior center, and began having trouble sleeping. Not because of illness, but because his body was carrying sorrow it had never been allowed to release. You see, emotional pain doesn't need to be dramatic to be damaging. And by the time it shows up in your health, the connection isn't always obvious. The power of expression. What keeps people alive well past 80 often isn't just physical strength. It's emotional ventilation. It's having safe, open outlets for sadness, for fear, for longing. It's being able to say, I miss her, or I'm still angry, or I feel alone, and not being judged for it. That kind of release is what lets the heart breathe again. And when the heart can breathe, the body can heal. That's why people who live long tend to have some kind of outlet. Maybe it's a trusted friend. Maybe it's a journal. Maybe it's faith or a community group or even a therapist who helps them unpack the stories they've carried for decades. Whatever the form, the principle is the same. What gets expressed can be transformed. What gets buried festers. Time to make space. So if you've been holding something in, not because you want to, but because you didn't know where to put it, it's time to make space. Not just for the sake of your emotions, but for your life. Because the truth is, the heart can only carry so much before it starts to quietly shut down. And if you want to make it well past 80, not just breathing but alive, you have to let it feel, do. Reason number 5. Gradual loss of daily purpose. One of the most invisible reasons many people don't thrive past 80 is the slow erosion of something we often take for granted until it's gone. Daily purpose. What is daily purpose? Not life purpose in some grand philosophical way, but the simple kind. The kind that makes you get out of bed in the morning with something to do, somewhere to go, someone to see. Purpose doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be watering the plants before the sun gets you hot. It can be feeding the neighborhood cat that waits outside your door. It can be writing a letter to your granddaughter or fixing the hinge on the back gate. What happens when it fades? But when these little routines start slipping away, when mornings come with no reason to move and evenings arrive without anything worth reflecting on, Something inside begins to quietly shut down. The body listens to the mind. And when the mind no longer sees a reason to push forward, the body follows. Appetite drops. Movement slows. And without purpose, the systems that used to regulate your health start to go quiet, not because they are broken, but because they are waiting for a reason to switch back on. The gradual erosion. It's easy to miss because it happens gradually. Maybe your weekly bridge game got cancelled. Maybe the church group stopped meeting. Maybe your family visits less often, or your old volunteer role ended when your knee started aching. You tell yourself it's normal, that it's part of aging. But deep down you can feel it, the days blending together, each one quieter than the last. Ruth's example. I once met a woman named Ruth, a Tassie, who seemed more alive than most people half her age. She wasn't wealthy. She wasn't in perfect health, and she wasn't surrounded by a big family. But she had one thing that never left her: routine. Every Monday, she wrote postcards to shut-ins in her church. Purpose, even the smallest kind, is like fuel. It tells your cells to keep repairing, your organs to keep functioning, your brain to keep learning. When you lose that sense of relevance, when you feel like your presence no longer matters to anyone or anything, the flame starts to dim. Finding your anchor. That's why people who live beyond a sea with grace and vitality usually have something anchoring their day. It could be a garden, a pet, a journal, a ritual, a phone call, a simple morning prayer. What matters isn't the scale. It's the consistency. It's knowing that when you open your eyes in the morning, there's a reason to rise. A signal to act. So if you've been feeling a little adrift, like your days have lost shape or meaning, don't ignore it. That's not just sadness. It's a signal. Your body is asking for rhythm again, for structure, for connection, for purpose. Because at the end of the day, longevity isn't just about the heart beating. It's about the heart wanting to beat. And that quiet desire to keep going, to stay connected, to still matter. That's what carries people past a sea and into lives that still feel full. Final thoughts. As we come to the end of this discussion, I want to leave you with a simple but powerful truth. Most people don't fade after a sea because of a single moment. It's not a diagnosis or a fall or a birthday that suddenly turns everything. It's the slow, quiet fading of habits, rhythms, and reasons to stay engaged. And often, those changes are so subtle, so gradual, that you don't realize what's happening until something inside feels dimmer than it used to. But the good news is this: just as these shifts happen slowly, they can also be reversed slowly. One walk outside, one extra conversation with someone at the store, one small stretch in the morning, one thing you do today, not because you have to, but because it brings structure, connection, or meaning. That's how you begin turning things around. Reflect and act. So think back to the 5 unexpected reasons we covered. Loss of microsocial engagement over cautious inactivity, disrupted sleep cycles from irregular light exposure, emotional suppression from loss and isolation, gradual loss of daily purpose. Which one surprised you the most? Which one felt uncomfortably familiar? And more importantly, which one are you willing to act on, even in a small way, starting today? You have more power than you think. Because the truth is, you have more power than you think, not to stop aging, but to change the way you age. And if you are willing to stay awake to the quiet shifts, if you are willing to guard your rhythms, protect your purpose, and let yourself feel what needs to be felt, then there's a good chance you won't just reach a sea. You'll live beyond it, fully, deeply, on your terms.